Okay. Well, hello, hello. We're back for another Other Ink Thursday, completing my series I've been doing in October of 2024 with people who made us a vaguely creepy game. I'm here joined today by Evan Rowland of Turtlebun, and we're going to discuss, among other things, Mud, a Golem Memoir. Evan, welcome to my interview.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I like to set up what we're going to talk about, but then that's for the future. We're going to first talk about this other thing. So I want to hear about the origins of Turtle Bun and you as a game designer and kind of I have this I have this, I think it's very human nature to be like, oh, I met you probably in 2021 or 2022 at PAX Unplugged, and I'm like, oh, I've never heard of these people before. They must be new.
Uh-huh.
And then I go back and listen to your podcast, and you've been podcasting about games for longer than I've been publishing games. So clearly, I'm incorrect that you're new, but like had just missed your work before, or whatever that. So I want to set my own knowledge straight about like the length of times that you've been at this. Um,
Sure.
so how did you get into games? Like, how did you become and you is sort of plural. I mean, you could tell me about, you know, you're only one half of Turtle Bun.
Right, right.
I
Yeah,
forgot
no,
to
I
say that
can
you're a
I can
game designer and podcaster. I forgot to say that.
that's fine. I think it's contextually evident. Uh and yeah, I can speak for my co-designer, Hannah Schaefer, who's the other half of Turtle Bun and who I've been designing games with for the duration of doing this work. Um, so how did we get into games? It started when we moved to a new town and were struggling to make friends, and we came up with the idea of this is Hannah's idea. Hannah had the idea of starting a community center, which is got to be the highest effort possible approach to making friends in a new place. But
Yeah,
we did it. We rented out a place and started staffing it at all hours and ran after school programs there. And on opening day, the very first day that the doors open, like six game designers walked in. We're in Western Massachusetts, and apparently this is just a game designer hub. And that was the point where we it even entered our heads that this was a possibility of something we could do. Uh, we are meeting Joshua A.C. Newman, Epidiah Ravachol, uh, Emily Care-Boss, and others who have all had some success in the indie sphere. And Vincent Baker, who's had enormous success.
yeah, yeah.
And and we're like, well, this seems fun and doable, and like we really could bring it to Kickstarter, bring something, and we both wanted to try. So I mean, I think it does a lot to be around people who are actually doing that work. And that
Hmm.
makes it feel so much more real and less
Yeah,
like a extremely risky, wild dream.
yeah.
Uh, so we made Questlandia. We made a role playing game with like a modest Kickstarter. And in the process of doing a Kickstarter, we had to learn everything. We had to
Hmm.
learn not just how to make a game, but also how to use layout software and how to market on Kickstarter and how to do shipping. And so it really like set all these wheels in motion where after we did that once, we were like, we know so much. We just have to do it again. It's like we've been trained to do this again.
Right, right. Why stop lifting now that we can lift this weight?
Right,
Um,
exactly.
I, I mean, I really only know you through listening to, dozens of episodes of your podcast, but like the idea that the two of you were like, let's start a community center and then let's learn everything we need to know about game design. That tracks. This seems like again, I don't. it's just consistent with like everything that you know that you do. You go for you got an idea, and then you seem to go for it hard, and that is that yeah, the hardest way to make friends is to start a community center.
Yeah,
But
no, it's
you
definitely on the line between sort of admirable and foolish.
yeah, I think that's maybe your like that's like your brand a bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, Hannah's the admirable one and is out today. But
So, a modest Kickstarter, Questlandia. Tell us a little bit about. I know a little bit about Questlandia because I've listened to your show and you talk about it, and then I think that leads into something else, Escape from Wonderland, that we're going to talk about later in this interview.
right.
What is Questlandia, and why has maybe the harder question is why has that been a thing that you've returned to um, several times, right? Because you have Noirlandia and you have other things that are sort of like Questlandia. You can't escape from it, right? It's like a first thing, but it continues to be like a constant thing.
Right. All right. Let me start by trying to describe Questlandia.
Yeah.
Um, so Questlandia is like a one or two shot RPG about world building. You invent a sort of fantastic kingdom together, and it's about playing out the lives of characters living within that society during its decline. Uh, it's it begins in a crisis, and over the course of the game, that turns into like a societally threatening event. But and I guess this is the key part of it, is that you as characters are kind of ambivalent about the fate of your society. You aren't necessarily trying to save it. You have your own relationship to the world as a whole and your own goals that you're trying to achieve. And in a usual game, everybody ends up liking the world because it's a communal act of creating it. But as characters, usually about half of them are cheering on its destruction.
Hmm.
It's it's about sort of sick societies and whether they can heal or not, and whether individuals should be invested in healing them or not. Uh, it was certainly influenced by us going through the recession of 2008 and
Sure.
thinking about American society and wanting to sort of pair the question of like what kind of society can we dream about together?
Hmm.
Like if we just allow ourselves to all go around the table and just play with it. I'm I don't want to go off on too much of a tangent, but I'm just very interested in the subject of society building as like an act that modern people are kind of cut off from because we're
Hmm.
kind of born into such a supersized society that we have very limited capacity to like take a hold of it and
Yeah.
design for ourselves what we want our society to look like. Uh, but I think that's like a human instinct. It's about how we relate to each other. So
Yeah. I,
Questlandia was about chewing on all that.
yeah. I think you're right that there is sort of a the society as it exists is it's monumental in some ways and seems unassailable, and like how could we ever change enough of it to really have a different society, even
Mm-hmm.
in the United States, there's hundreds of millions of people in the United States, like all kind of operating in the same way.
Right, right.
Yeah, but then I think there are so many games that are doing exactly what you described Questlandia is doing, is like, okay, set all that aside and let's from a blank piece of paper, let's imagine a world and how we want to relate to each other or how we could relate to each other. I think there is, I assume they all kind of come out of the same sort of like, I don't know, is it cultural ennui or
Or
something
yeah, like
that
a
we're at this
frustrated
point?
instinct
Yeah,
of wanting to imagine.
yeah.
Uh, I my highest hope is that it's like an act that can sort of train that muscle and
Hmm.
help people feel like they have the capacity to be architects of societal relations.
Yeah.
and maybe in that way be more open-minded to uh, thinking that the world can change and
Mm,
attempting it.
yeah, yeah.
But maybe it's also just like a fun diversion where we can have this little table space where we actually are allowed to make our society, and it's just a pleasure.
Yeah, it can be both and. It can be both and, I think.
Right.
Um, this is uh, one of the other conversations I had this month with some designers who were hitting on very similar themes. They made a game called The Old Ways Must Go, and it's a tarot based sort of it's like a ritual, but it's like the ritual is imagining a new society and like taking on you draw the cards and then you're looking at the cards and like, well, I will have this new role in the new world order, that we're going to establish together. And it's sort of like it's a very similar theme that you're talking about
Yeah.
there with Questlandia. Um, so I mean, is there because it's your first game or the game that you came out with, I mean, that I guess sets up sort of like themes of game designers and what Turtlebun wants to do. And so is that why you have returned to it a couple times as a game, or is it just sort of like it's part of the brand, right? Like this is the Landia is just the thing that you put on the end of your couple game titles because you have to, right? It's the you've got a reputation to maintain, or is there something about that you're
I
really
mean, we
happy with?
we we did Landia one more time. Yeah, we've had like a push pull relationship to Questlandia,
Yeah.
where it's like, I guess, having made Questlandia and finished it, we had a mixed relationship to it. Some parts of it we really liked, and some parts of it we felt like just didn't never quite got exactly where we wanted them to be. Uh, and in some ways, it might be not even that there's anything wrong with the game, but just that like it didn't perfectly scratch the itch that we were trying to get at, what we're trying to express. So when it came time to look at the next game, there's these dual urges to like drop Questlandia hard and get into and like be able to start fresh and to address all the things that felt like they were missing,
Hmm.
and the urge to hold on to everything that was working and was satisfying, and also that we have the built up familiarity with and like the sort of uh like a sort of better vocabulary of speaking in those mechanics, and just understanding deeply what they do, and the sort of never ending playtest of every session, just getting to know it better and
Yeah.
better. So by the time we got to Norlandia, Norlandia still has like a society building aspect of it, but it's still about characters at odds with them, but it puts it in the noir lens of like, you know, a principled person in an unprincipled world being just ground to dust by that, in the pursuit of truth.
Hmm.
Uh, and
That's a
you
theme that
know,
kind of goes hard. I like it. I mean, that's
yeah,
noir for you. That's yeah.
I am super into it. I mean, it's like a fascination of mine, and it was like bringing Questlandia's society building aspects into it helped make sure that this was a story about a societal sickness rather than an individual murderer or whatever.
Hmm.
It's like in Norlandia, it's always connected to the world as a whole and the sort of intrinsic uh, weaknesses and oversights and corruptions of the society that the crime takes place in. And that for me is what makes it a satisfying conspiracy. That's like what I love about Chinatown or whatever, where it's like there's a crime, there's a mystery, but when you get to the end of the mystery, you end up looking at this like grand vista of the world you're in, and you realize like that's been the crime the whole time. It's the
Yeah.
whole world.
Right. It reminds me of is it Touch of Evil? Is that the movie with very young Charlton Heston and it's got Orson Welles as the
I've never
detective
seen
crime
it.
boss. but it's very noir and it's got that same sort of thing. Like there is a murder, it starts it all off, and it is like, yeah, you just keep zooming out, and it's like the it's the whole society is wrong, is sort of
Right.
the theme of that movie. Yeah. Um, and
So,
it's yeah,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I don't know. I was just gonna move on to the next question, but you've got more to talk about. Please do.
Oh, I guess it's just to think about going back and forth from Questlandia. I guess, I guess like over the years, because recently, just a couple years ago now, we published a second edition of Questlandia, and that was a intentional reevaluation of the original work and kind of like saying like we're not going to run away from this first thing that feels flawed. We're going to like actively
Hmm.
embrace it and try to like figure out why it is special and why it meant so much to us and how we
Yeah.
can bring everything we've learned over a decade of game design back to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh and I, uh, I don't know if it's the right thing to like, keep sort of looking back as we decide new projects, but we seem to be drawn to it.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand that impulse about like the coming back to it. Like our first published game as Wet Ink Games is at this point does not fit in the rest of our oeuvre, right? It was sort of like it was our first game. We had like no rules. We had written things for other people's, but this like, oh, we're gonna write our own game and no rule. Like, we will decide what it'll be like.
Yeah,
So it is like a perfect encapsulation of everything that who we were at the time that we wrote it. My writing
right.
partner, business partner, and I, Brandon. And I don't know that it's a good game. People have found some stuff to like in it, and I'm still proud of the work that we did on it. But it is sort of like the next game was like, okay, we have to do something different. That is not going to we're not going to continue to work on this game. And so then we still have copies laying around. We sold some. I was at a con last weekend and we sold copies of that game at that
Oh,
con,
nice.
and so as long as there are copies, we will continue to sell it and be happy with it. But it is sort of our second designed system is like a has elements like almost exactly like you were saying. It's like it's got some elements that we liked from the first system, and then took some stuff out and added some other parts in, and so there's like a sort of a design continuity there, but mostly it's like, no, that's an abandoned road and of course we always say also like sales drive the line. So like I don't know that we could
Right.
sell a third book in that series. We did a book and a supplement. I don't know how successful a third one in that series would be. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
so like it's not necessarily something, and then to do the work to modify it to like the system we're using now is like, again, is that quote unquote worth the revisitation? Like we've never decided that it is, but
Right.
maybe someday, we'll those that story world will come back in a different form, but so far it hasn't yet. But it is, I don't know, it's a strange thing to have that be there as part of on the table, right? We're like, oh, this game and these three games use the same system, and then this one is totally different. Um, but
Right.
it's for we like to say that every game is for someone, right? So there are some people who that
Yeah.
game is for, and they buy it still, so that's nice. Um, yeah, but talking about that, revisiting, what would we revisit, and just the natural sort of like we're better game designers, we're better producers, than we were when we first started. So it's that's always in the brain.
Yeah, I like what you said about it being just sort of like a snapshot of
Hmm.
who you were and what you cared about and what you knew at that moment.
Right.
And yeah, it's great to move on, but it's so special to have that snapshot and to
Yeah.
like be able to make a game that's like in conversation with who you were in the past.
Hmm. Yeah. And you revisit it and you think of the hours of labor to put in to produce it, right? Because like you were saying, you have to
Yeah.
learn all that stuff, right? I mean, we had both written things for other people, but this was our first one, right? That we did all on our own, and so it is. Yeah, it's called Wild Skies. It's a diesel punk anthropomorphic sky pirates above Europe. Very a bunch of niche little circles there that make it very much for some people and mostly not for very many people.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle of that Venn diagram.
All right. I'll send you a link. You can check it out.
Awesome. I'd love that.
All right. I do want to ask you about some of the things, but I think we can kind of incorporate that into the next thing because I do want to talk about mud.
Yeah.
This video is scheduled to come out on Halloween.
Ooh.
So it is the Golem, I think, has been accepted in the family of monsters, along with the vampire and the werewolf, and not as famous as those two, but
Hmm.
I think you can find like D&D stat blocks for a golem. They use that word in the source book. I think it has. Well, that's one of the questions I want to ask, right? Do you think that it has achieved that sort of like same level? Not necessarily, again, nobody's going to beat werewolves and vampires. They're like at the top. But like,
Hmm.
I think the golem is achieved some sort of like escaping from its original cultural context to become sort of quote unquote just a pop culture monster. Maybe not fully. I don't know. It's somewhere in that thing. But um,
Yeah.
were you
Uh,
drawn to it for any of those reasons or anything? Or-
well, uh, so Hannah likes to tell a story that predated us making mud, which is being on Twitter and seeing people arguing about whether using golems in D&D or whatever is like insensitive to
Hmm.
its Judaic origins.
Yeah.
And Hannah and I were both Jewish, but Hannah's closer to a practicing Jewish person than I am. And she was like, what? Like the golem is not like a extremely sensitive, powerful cultural icon. It's a story, it's a myth, it's an it's a concept, but it's not like taking the Lord's name in vain for Jewish people to have a golem walking around.
Sure.
Uh, at least, speaking for ourselves, that's where we're at with it. And
Right.
like, and so that immediately just made her want to re-examine the concept of the golem. And we got into a long conversation about just what golems meant to each of us and the I guess we both connected with the concept of like a detachment from your own personhood, from your
Hmm.
sense of self. Uh, the like the the sort of implication that we come into this world with a purpose. We seem purpose built to do things, but when that purpose isn't given, when we find ourselves in like a complex and confusing world, you have to there's nothing to do but decide for yourself. And how can anybody be equipped to make that decision?
Hmm.
It feels like a chicken and egg situation where it's
Yeah.
like you need to have a sense of self to find your sense of self so that you know what connects with you.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the opening ideas that went into making this graphic novel zine game.
Right. We didn't even talk about the format of it. We should talk about the format of it a little bit. But everything that you just said, just a couple days ago, I went because again, it's spooky season. There was a dramatic reading of Frankenstein that I
Ooh,
I went to, and it was all of those same. It's
right,
just the context, right? It's all of those same things. It's like the first as they presented it in this particular dramatic reading, it was. The first moments of existence for Frankenstein's creation were a moment of connection and like reaching out, and then Frankenstein rejects his connection, and then the creature has to figure out why he exists on his
right,
own,
right,
because
right.
Frankenstein takes no responsibility, and like that sort of. the way that that story, not the Boris Karloff version, but the like Mary Shelley version, Frankenstein's monster becomes extremely articulate and like very logical. It like argues forcefully for like the justification of its actions, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's just the way you were just talking about the Golem, it is very similar thing, which is again to go back to the D&D monster manual, they got the stone golem and the flesh golem are like on, those are
Hmm.
both in the golem section. So the
Right.
Frankenstein has sort of
Right. No, yeah.
become a golem according to the rules of fantasy popular, role playing.
It didn't really
Um,
occur to me until now, but you're right. It's like spot on. It is a Golem story
yeah,
with Frankenstein.
yeah. It's right. I mean, whatever. Dig into the sources of Shelley. I don't know what she was. I mean, we know some of what she was pulling from, but I don't know beyond that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no slate on her imagination either.
Right.
It's just but yeah, the themes are there.
Yeah. And so you mentioned the sort of this memoir, the comic, you call it graphic novel. Like, so what do people? I mean, it's like it's like a comic book, and I saw it in person at PAX Unplugged, and then I was low on funds by that time in the con, so then I had to buy it later. But it is like it's very much almost like it's almost not a game, and that's one of the things that
Yeah.
I was asking you before we started recording how much we should sort of reveal and talk about the game, because I mean you look at it and it's like, oh, it's a comic book, and then you're like, oh wait, but there's questions every once in a while that makes it a game. So we can talk about the art and stuff as well, but this I like I said, maybe there's a way that the experience of reading the game unfolds that maybe is maybe not to be revealed. I don't know. Do you want to like keep the exact way that
Yeah.
it works secret for people to experience, or do you
I
want to, or is it like, no, it works this way, go try it, like I don't know which way is better advertisement for the game.
I personally find it hard to describe exactly what mud is as a like it is a weird creation, a weird experience. So I'm inclined to like to try to express what's going on with it. And honestly, I'm inclined to like just get into it and like really talk about it as well as we can.
Okay.
And just with the caveat, I guess, that a viewer might lose out on certain surprises
Hmm.
uh, if they know the form going into it. I don't think like for me that kind of like surprise spoiler thing is not the core of what the game is about. And like I don't think you're missing an essential part of it,
Yeah.
but it is, I guess it's a novelty that it is such a strange experience, an unusual experience, that it is, even if it's not the core experience, it's going to be a rare one to be surprised at what's happening to you as you open up this book and flip through the pages. So I guess
Yeah.
that's the warning I would give to folks.
Oh no, I think that's really good. Like it is an experience, and things will happen to you, I think is oh wait, not in a bad way. Not in a bad way. It's not a threat. But it is sort of it's a thing to be experienced. And if you want to go experience it, it's very reasonably priced on the internet. You can get this game and play this game. And it is, it's a solo play experience, which is why I was attracted to it. I've been playing a lot of solo games the last couple of years, and it is somewhat like reading a comic book, somewhat like playing a role-playing game, but yet it is its own sort of thing. It's very interesting, very interesting. So if you think that sounds cool, go try it out, and I don't know, skip forward 5 minutes or whatever in this video. We'll maybe talking about something else. Maybe
Cool.
longer than 5 minutes. I don't know.
All right. Everybody's had their chance.
That's right. You could get off. If you're still here, you want to hear about it. Um, uh,
So
so
yeah,
I
let's talk about it.
I think I don't know whether I mean, I want to ask you about the art and being sort of like the art person for Turtle Bun and what goes into that. But that's not necessarily, we've set up all this like intimate stuff about the game. So I think you should do that first, right? The thing that when I played it, I had seen it in person, so I knew that it had this sort of comic book, graphic novel sort of experience, right? And I've done a few of those kind of games where you know, Fan Writer has them where that's like they're like a choose your own adventure, right? And they'll actually draw like two paths in the panel,
Right.
and like
Yeah,
one
yeah.
path leads to a different panel number, and the other path leads to yet another panel number, and you're moving around visually through the book. But this is not as much as that. I mean, it is straightforward, standard start at the upper left and go to the bottom right sort of
Hmm.
reading of a comic book. And it's asking you questions every once in a while, but the thing that you described earlier about it being sort of like disconnected from yourself, I thought it was so fascinating when the game asked me, the player, to like look out the window to like take a moment to observe nature or something but it wasn't tell me to, it was like you may do this right now if you want, and that gives you this like in-game result. And it was sort of very much breaking down the sort of like re not reality, but like the immersion, right, of being into the, okay, I'm in an experience, I'm this creature, I'm having these experiences. Oh wait, but then the game is reminding me that I exist outside of that experience and inviting me to do things in the quote unquote real world to impact what's happening in the game world. It's not something I'd ever experienced before, and I was like, oh, this is truly fascinating, of just the element to the play experience. So I mean that was my big thing for it, was like, this is never experienced this before. So interesting to kind of navigate that sort of like layer of like real me sitting on the couch reading the game with like fake me of the monster, the creature, the golem in the story. It just fascinating, like um, game design, I think, to do that to players.
I'm so glad you connected with it. Like, for me, it's so much about it just feels like weird and experimental, and putting it onto the world and just did not know if anybody was going to connect with it or enjoy it. I think it's a a impressive quality to be willing to engage with something so odd and unexpected as the sort of instructions and suggestions in this book as you go through. Uh, it, you know, so I've done a lot of reading of graphic novels and comics, and I'm very into that form.
Hmm.
And something that's a natural struggle with that is the pace. Uh, with words, like if you're constructing prose, you can simultaneously be using the prose to describe something, but also to pace something. You can add a sentence just because we want to linger for
Mm.
the time it takes to read that sentence. But in a graphic novel, it's so easy to go blindingly fast and to just get into this like whirl. And, it's like watching like a reel of film practically. You can like see it move by
or
moving that
or
quickly.
or or the mad people, whatever, people listen to podcasts at like three times speed, like I'm like,
Yes, right.
why do you do like, but I mean, people want to get more in, right? But like it's like then you don't even know what the people sound like because you're hearing them like fat. Anyway, yeah, I mean, similar, yes, but yeah, graphic novels, like how quickly do you take in the page, and how does the art invite you to linger? Like if it's a very sort of sketchy or large panel size kind of thing, like you'll move so much more quickly through it because there's literally less
Right.
to look at per page. But then you get some comics that are just they're so detailed. Each page is like what is happening in this panel and like what are all the details, and you can read the words, but then you're looking at the art for longer, and it is such a both of those things affect like pace, like you were saying. There's a I'm thinking about, some Chris Claremont comics from back in the day that I've read that just are walls of text. And then there's also pictures of superheroes punching each other on this side of it,
Right.
and like you spend a lot of time on those pages because, it's Magneto and Charles Xavier explaining their philosophies to each other
Yeah.
yet again. That's Chris Claremont, but it is, um, uh,
But it keeps you in the moment.
right, you're
Yeah.
there watching the big fight, because they've got so much to say to each other in those moments.
So
Uh,
we got really excited in Mud to like try to use some of these prompts as a way to give a rhythm and pace to the
mm,
story. And I mean, there's a part of me that just feels like, a proper artist would achieve that pace by drawing 8 extra pages of extravagant landscape, uh, rather than inviting the person to do their own imagining
right.
of a journey to help give that sense of distance and pace. But it does, like you said, like by inviting you to imagine yourself doing something, to do something as the reader, it is bringing you into the story in a different kind of way. The opening page of Mud is like a sort of transition from darkness to light, like a sort of opening of the eyes of the
Mm,
golem, like waking up to experience. And it felt really appropriate for this story to like have you inhabit that space of, you know, also being a consciousness who was born onto this world and is also navigating it right along with this new being. I
yeah.
keep thinking of one of the early suggestions, which is to sort of mentally take a walk from where you currently are, uh, down the road, down, a distance from where you ordinarily are, imagining it as far as you can, as well as you know your current surroundings, and walk until you come to the edge where you just don't know what is past that point. Uh, that uh, that was kind of a discovery for us, like coming up with that idea and that prompt and then actually doing it for me gives me a feeling like nothing else. Like it's a strange feeling of connectedness, not only with myself but with the world around me and my knowledge and familiarity with it, and forcing me to get into an unfamiliar spot in my own imagination.
Yeah.
uh
I think I'm not a huge LARP person, but I think a lot of LARPs kind of try to achieve that as well, where they are like, oh, we took all the chairs out of this room, and or whatever, that
mhm.
they're trying to shake things up a little bit, so that you are sort of freer to experience whatever the game holds for you to experience, and so I think it's something like that, in a broad way, it's something like that that sort of invites you to do something that you wouldn't necessarily have done otherwise, to put you in a headspace. You go on that journey mentally, like you were just talking about, and then you turn the page, and then you have to like choose, parallel. There's like parallel. I was just flipping through the file. There's parallel tracks for like, you choose a job for the golem to do, and like they have different series of panels that you're reading depending on
Yeah.
which choice you make. But like you're making that choice after you were having this imaginary journey of yourself. It's some, there's very like there's a very intangible relationship between those two things, and it definitely is not unsettling in like a bad way, but it is unsettling as in like it's keeping you sort of unexpectedly you're unexpected as you get ready to go through the next part of the game, because you are not it's constantly encouraging you not to think of yourself as a person sitting on a couch, but as or I was sitting on a couch, a chair, wherever you're sitting, playing the game. I don't know. It's such a fascinating game mechanic as a thing to do. It's almost, yeah. I we are fine. You said it's almost impossible to talk about the game, and I agree. It is sort of difficult to even describe what it is, other than sort of this emotional playing with your emotions. Again, not in a bad way, but like inviting you to feel things. The instruction
Yeah.
that's like write a letter to someone about a weird animal that you saw, and then
Hmm.
like what is that? What is that? That's a game mechanic that like I have to write a letter to someone I know about a thing I saw. And that's now that you've done that, you're prepared to like play the game, like it very unusual, very unusual.
Yeah. And all of those um in the game they're called, I guess they're called thoughts, like just
Hmm.
the sort of activities that the reader is invited to take part in.
Yeah.
And they, like you said, they're all suggestions, right? Like it's the act of declining to write a letter to someone. Like we wanted that to be part of the game. Like you can say like, no, I don't think I'm gonna write a letter right now. But knowing that that's like that, even that experience of being like, do I want to write a letter? What would that be like? Do I want to give that time? No, I don't think I do. Uh, is like a welcomed way to participate in the story.
Right.
Um,
And you're checking off they are thoughts, and then you've got a load of a grid, not a grid, but like a timer. I don't even know what to call it, like a series of checkboxes that you can. I've had this many thoughts throughout the thing, and then that kind
mhm,
of changes the ending in a choose your own adventure sort of style. Like if you did this but didn't have this many thoughts, here's your outcome, and it you
right.
don't really know how they're going to come out until they do at the end. So
And then
that's
that's interspersed with like I guess like a more strict mechanic, which is about the golem coming up with its identity,
hmm hmm
and you're having like points where you're deciding which what I guess it broke down your identity into uh, your dream, your purpose, and your sense of beauty.
Yeah.
That's right.
hmm That's right.
Uh, and that's a part where you really do make decisions and have the chance to sort of, lose a sense of purpose. Sometimes you can decide one, sometimes it's not a decision, sometimes something is just lost. Uh, and that's, I don't know. I guess I can't say how successful it was, but like for me, I loved that sort of process of like demarking how we view
Mm.
ourselves and how we value ourselves, and
Yeah.
whether those come from an internal choice or an external perspective on us. Uh, and I guess even though I said I'm into to spoiling the mechanics, I guess I do feel like the ultimate outcome of your decisions about your identity, I do want that to be a surprise for people who
Mm.
go through the book.
Well, what I was thinking about talking about it is it like it's another sort of participatory act, right? You're writing down what your dream is, and then there are things that can change it or cross it out, and there's sort of those three parts, the purpose, the dream, and the beauty, and it's almost like it's like the like any sort of journaling game. that, what happens is what you wrote down, and so like similarly you've got these blocks and you're writing them in, and of course, I mean, I don't know if this is intentional on your part as designers, but like the sort of the part of the legend of the golem is that it's got the word life written on its head, right?
Yeah,
It's the word for life, and it's that it is what is written down is what it is. It is alive because it has the word life written on it, right?
right,
And
right.
so then you are keeping track of the golem's memories, and what is written down is what is, and then that gets changed by events or crossed out by events, and it is sort of similarly it is a similar sort of process, I think, that kind of, again, it captures the sort of original story and lets you live it in a way, which I think is, again, it's a fascinating thing that you've done with this game.
Uh, I'm that's a I just really appreciate your like uh engaged perspective on it. And I didn't even really connect the sort of act of like, the writing is the life of the golem. And so as we're writing down our identity, it's like you're participating in the act of creation, uh in like the most literal way by scribbling with a pencil. That's
Mm.
really cool. Uh
It's even
uh
cooler than you do.
it's
Uh,
cooler than I knew.
but it is a strange game. Do you? I am looking at the time, and we have talked for a while. I do want to quickly ask you about the art in it
Yeah,
because it's by you, right? It's not. It's
yeah,
you did the art, and so the sort of how would you even call it like sort of a messy ink wash style. There's not a lot of lines. It's a lot of like everything's bleeding into each other a lot.
right.
There's like we mentioned comics a bunch. Like comics, there's pencils and inks and then and colors. There's
Hmm.
lines on the page. That's what makes it a comic book a lot. And you're no lines, no lines, just sort
Yeah.
of areas of color and black and white and gray and um, I don't know if you want to say anything about like kind of creating it or trying to capture a certain vibe with the work or what. I don't. How does it compare to your? I assume like I assume you did like digital paintings or like used paper to and then scanned it or whatever. But like I don't know what was the process of creating the art and how does that contribute to the overall vibe of the game? This is my real question.
Um, so it's digitally drawn. I'm using I'm using Clip Studio. I'm using a particular style and set of brushes that's smudgy. It's like drawing by smudges. It's like
Hmm. Yeah, it has
a
almost like a charcoal smudge
yeah, it has like a
drawing
very
quality.
charcoal-esque kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's on one hand, it's just very practically playing to my strengths. Like I've never been great at like clean, precise line work, but it also is it's connected to like the way that I draw and like to draw, which is generally not having a full plan going into it and starting by like plopping some ink down and starting to smudge it around and see what's coming out of it. And in that way, I think it's a little closer to sculpting. It's like
Hmm.
pushing around the colors and shading and uh, sort of forming it into these uh, areas of light and shadow. And so for me, drawing the golem and felt like, you know, I made it into exactly the kind of project I'd want to draw, where it's like
Hmm.
the murkiness and the sort of the the looseness of it. That's like a lot of what I draw. For me, feels like it could match the themes of constructing a perspective and a sense of self from the like just raw light and shadow of the world around you, the substance of it. Um, And it's interesting because when we first conceived of this, when we kickstarted it, we were just describing this as a zine. Like our idea was it was going to be like more just like a collection of little thoughts and activities and stuff that would be all sorts of just sort of reflections on the concept of the golem and the themes of it. But once I started drawing, it just started gaining this sense of narrative flow.
Mm,
And there's this dynamic with Hannah and me where I'd go and be like, okay, well, I made this page and ended up kind of in a row, but like we got to break out of this narrative thing and start just, because it's going to take forever if it's all going to be graphic novel pages. I was thinking it's just going to be little doodles and stuff in the
right.
middle of prose and things. And she was like, no, that story is so good. We got to keep going with the story. And it definitely turned into a much, much bigger project than we expected. In making it, it's a fully graphic novel, really. It's like a
Yeah,
fully illustrated story.
yeah,
Uh, but I don't know, I mean, I got into the swing of it. I started to just feel so immersed in the experience of making these pages. I think it
mm,
it gets better as it goes, in my opinion. I think that like as it goes, it gets a stronger sense of like not just the the representational art, but the sort of layout of the pages and paneling and the beats of the story. Uh, by the ending pages, those are some of the my favorite things I've ever drawn. So it definitely sucked me in.
mm. Yeah, I'm looking at the yeah, I think you're right. Like there's a sort of a softness at the end that is not exactly at the beginning. But that I think also sort of just plays into the that's just so part of the theme, right? It's just like kind of becoming more of a thing physically as well as narratively. It's I don't know. I think it just all it contributes there, I think, to the whole. Uh, or after the fact, you could declare that it was intentional all along.
Oh yeah, no.
Uh,
Well, I mean, it had the dual benefits of me getting more comfortable and experienced with drawing in that style, and also getting a better and better sense of the story we wanted to tell as we went
hmm
through it.
hmm
Uh, we had the rough blocking out, but like as page by page came together, by the end of it, uh, I felt like we had actually found the real purpose of why we were doing this and what we
Yeah.
wanted to impart through it.
Yeah.
Uh, and I haven't had a lot of conversations with people about it. Like I so appreciate being able to chat with you about it and how much you have thought about it and are appreciating it because for me it was like months of just being in this hole with the golem, like drawing and drawing and drawing and thinking and uh it's uh, it's it's always been like a smaller project with a smaller reach compared to some of the other things we've done.
Sure.
But
But then
it means a lot
those,
to me.
yeah, those are often there's almost are always more personal projects that way that they so well I'm glad that you did it because it's certainly a unique experience to read it and play it and so I'm happy to talk about it and what we're thinking about in creating it because it's I've never played anything like it so it's I think worth talking about. All right. So we've talked for almost the full amount of time that we have set aside for this. So I do want to ask you about some other things, if that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, First off, I love Design Doc, which is the name of your show. You and Hannah are very good at like just laying it all out there. And I mean, I think that's been reflected in this interview as well. Like you just like you're willing to talk about all the stuff and like kind of have your struggles and your sort of, oh, is this a good idea? And I don't know, and let's just go with it. And so the show is very, um, it does really feel like there's podcasts are always like friends in your ears, right? But
Yeah.
the being at the design table with you and hearing the way you work, you just recorded and that's the show, and I think the conversations that the two of you have are so open and honest about like the struggles and triumphs and like uncertainties. I think it's very valuable content in terms of like for game designers to hear like here's some people making games and it's not always like, it's not always about like triumphant like oh we have a crowdfunding and it's going to be awesome and give us
Right.
your money. It's like this is just the kind of daily creative grind in a lot of ways about like some ideas don't go anywhere and some ideas are really exciting and I don't know I think your show is great
Oh, thank you.
I've been happy to listen to it and which leads me it's all a big setup for you this earlier this year you and Hannah were like hey let's revisit Noirlandia or Questlandia but do it like as a
Hmm.
creepy amusement park and there were several episodes of the show of you designing this game and sort of like potentially designing the game. And then like I don't know if it was your intention or not, but now like that game is like on crowdfunding that you like designed live on your podcast.
Yeah.
As the time that this will go up, it will be live, and so we'll definitely have a link to it and stuff like that. But like, what? I don't know. Like I've said a whole bunch, right? But like I kind of want to hear about your podcast and your like what you think of the podcast and the reach or the that you have for it or the point of making and recording these sessions. And then specifically I want to hear about how like the decision you went from like was it always the plan to make a game that was going to be a published thing or was it just did it happen naturally?
Mm.
I don't know. Tell me all the details, and then we'll get into like the campaign as well.
All right. Yeah. Design doc. I know my favorite thing about design doc is when we are getting into saying stuff that feels like there's like this gentle taboo
Mm,
about sharing it. And sometimes when we get into like exact numbers of people who are getting our stuff or money or more generally like the sort of negative like fears and disappointments and dead ends of game design, uh you know it's it's kind of satisfying to be able to just be like, well, we're just going to put it out there.
your
We're
better
gonna
never than late question mark episode is I shared it
mm,
everywhere because it is so raw. It is so valuable to hear like humans talking about like their thoughts about these things. So like we finished it, but is it would it have been better if we never did?
yeah,
Is a deep
right.
question, and I think you that it I don't know. It's very very open. That's that taboo kind of thing. Like yeah.
I think maybe to some extent the limited reach that we have in our games and in our podcast are like what let us get away with it because
Mm,
we don't have swarms of people who are upset with us for hyping them up for something that never comes out or being
mm,
late on something or uh, with money. I mean, if people feel anything about money, right? It can be like you you rich snobs or
right.
you pitiful like imposters or whatever.
Hmm.
It's there's like I think there's good reasons that there's sort of a taboo on these kinds of conversations. Like it does open you up to uh, both receiving and causing some like disappointment. Uh, but it it kind of seems like we've cultivated like an audience of people who are just into that. Uh,
I think
like
I mean
people.
I hope so, I guess. I'm very much into what you're doing. So I'm in. I'm one of those people, I guess.
I mean, one of our recent episodes was, I think it was just called like, "Will we ever finish Questlandia 2?" Which was the project that kicked off the entire podcast. We were
Hmm.
like, this is going to be a 1 year podcast. We're going to cover from start to finish the experience of designing Questlandia 2. And it's been 6.5 years. And Questlandia 2 maybe never going to happen. And that feels like, it's not just a worry about disappointing others and what other people say. Like it's about confronting our own disappointments and frustrations about the twists that this work has taken
Yeah,
and the sort of I guess like the compromised place where our time and energy and interests and financial situation and global situation
sure.
has like conspired to make what our projects are. I guess like all of that can be bearable in the framework of like this is the ongoing struggle and experience of trying to create something meaningful, uh, and live lives where it's possible to do that creation, even if it's not profitable, but we want it to be profitable. But if it's not, then, Hannah's not here right now because she just got a full time job, which is going to be a great help for the like affording to live aspects of doing
It's
creative work. But,
absolutely.
a bit of a ding to the time. So those compromises are just ongoing. And, you know, I feel like it's been good for us and our mental health to have this podcast where we are sharing those as they happen and owning it and not feeling like these have to be the shameful secrets of
Mm,
all the difficulties uh, that go on.
right.
And for folks who don't have those difficulties, then maybe they can just feel all the better for hearing how much we're struggling.
Well, I think everyone does creatively struggle, or I mean, many do. I mean, I guess there are some people who are, they've reached a level of confidence in their work and success where like work comes to them and they just have to keep doing it, and but then sometimes I meet those people and they're not they've lost something. Not that struggle makes the artist or struggle makes the art or anything like that, but that if you are sort of there is something to, like, again, I go back to the honesty. Like you and Hannah on the show are so like, these are the things we're thinking about, these are the struggles we're having, and this is the art that is producing. And if you've got sort of a successful art job or a creative job, sometimes it's like the
Mhm.
factors then become more like, corporate wants this to be included in
Well,
here, and so
right.
now I've got to do that, and like, we're turning over 6 projects this year, and the demands become different, right? They're more about the project management than about the creative side, I think. And so, and obviously, I'm grossly reducing, these things for purpose
No,
of
I mean,
argument or
I
whatever.
completely agree. Like jokes aside, I do think like there's just levels of compromise and struggle uh, in every situation. I think
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to do something meaningful, uh, you're going to encounter difficulties, whether it's with the world around you or the world within you.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
and and I'm definitely not the kind of person who thinks that artists should suffer and that's where good art comes from or anything. But I do think that navigating those difficulties and those struggles is part of the art.
Yeah.
It's part of the experience. And when I talked about us being in a community center and seeing people who are actually engaged in making games and kickstarting and all that, like I think it means a lot to have that connection, like to be able to see other people just as humans engaging with these difficulties and successes and complexities. And, that's, I think my highest hope for Design Doc is that it encourages people who are trying to create and
Yeah.
not feeling like they are uh, unqualified or alone in struggling.
Yeah, I think yeah, I agree. I think you have achieved that because that is how I would describe it. It is such a human listening experience to be like, here are some people who have ideas, and this is, and you too can be a human who has ideas, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I think it is. Yeah, I think you're doing good work with your show. And so I guess I mean I still haven't asked you about Escape from Wonderland,
Oh
but
yeah.
do you feel that like and so this is sort of the thing, and I know we've talked for almost an hour, or we talked for over an hour now, so like we don't
Mhm.
I don't want to
Well,
I don't
don't worry
know.
on my account. Like,
Okay, okay,
whatever.
okay. So the question is, it's me. I'm failing to keep my interview to an hour. Once again, so like again, talking about like how great or how much I appreciate the podcast, like listening to your beginning episodes when you were just like, what if we do Questlandia? What if we start with the Questlandia rule set, the character creation process, and then, but what if we make it like spooky and toward a different purpose than
Right.
the original Questlandia game? And that was, I guess, what I'm asking is like, do you feel that the podcast is sort of just a document of the creative processes you were doing anyway, or does it kind of generate, because we know we got to talk about it, does it generate content? Like,
Mm.
is there a reciprocal relationship there, or is it more like, "Oh, we were going to be designing this anyway, we just turned on the camera while we did it, or the microphone while we did it, you know?" Um,
In the case of Escape from Wonderland and starting that design on Design Doc, uh, I'd say it's like mostly documenting as opposed to generative. I think that it did, what's the word? It did help us with like task management. It's like,
hmm,
okay, well, we can't get on a tangent and tell us, I guess we probably did get on tangents in the recording, but we got to keep them pretty focused on the gameplay that we're trying to design here because we are recording. That helped. That was like a good container. Though, you know, there's lots of things you can use as a container for that, right? Like whether it's just setting a timer or like going to an office or working in a library or whatever it is. So it helped in that way. In terms of generative, like it's it does give me this feeling when I'm recording the podcast of like having an audience, of
hmm.
like hearing other people at the table. And that gives me a certain kind of excitement, like, and a kind of like, uh, what's the word? I don't know. It's just sort of like playing the game. It's like being at a table and playing a game, and you want to have fun with these other people, and you want to entertain and be entertained. And bringing that energy into a design session where normally that's not so much a part of it. It's just, when we're off
Hmm.
air, Hannah and
No.
I are just staring at each other with neutral expressions, monotonously listing mechanics. But like on the podcast, it feels more lively and
Yeah.
fun. So that there was something there that helped like guide and prompt, and the sessions went really well. I might be undervaluing the recording for how well those sessions went and how much our ideas started to really come together quickly into this complete game.
Yeah.
Complete's
And
the wrong word.
well,
Closer to complete game.
well, and I think that, I mean, I listened to those episodes where you were designing the original what became Escape from Wonderland, and I didn't get the sense And the reason why I wanted to ask about it is I didn't initially have the sense that that I would see this on crowdfunding, in October, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
the episodes started coming out in July, and so like you're just sort of like, I don't know, we're going to do this thing and see what comes of it. And then, so did you always intend to like, if it went well, that you were planning to like complete it as a project and put it out for crowdfunding, or did you was it sort of a discovery of the like, oh no, there is some legs here, let's keep going?
That was a discovery. Like our initial thought was just like, what if we release like a free one-page document that people can use to play a spooky game of Questlandia?
Right.
Uh, and
I'm imagining that it's grown a little bit since
it's
then.
grown a huge bit. Yeah, it's now we're looking at making just a full book out of it, like an 80-page standalone game. Uh, and
It's
that's
incredible.
it's like as we work, we come up with a lot of ideas that we are excited about, and we bring them to the design table and we start working with them, and we get to the first complexities and difficulties and we start working on those. And that's like this major point where projects can spin off into the probably never going to finish bin, uh, or have a sort of clearer path forward.
Yeah.
And this one really arrived at that. Like it just started clicking. Like each one of the mechanics was like, oh, that's just what we want, working in just the way we want it to work, hitting just the theme we want it to hit. I don't think it's, I think it's partially an accident, but I think it's also that we've been talking to each other about being trapped at amusement parks as like a theme and like a concept for years.
Yeah.
Uh, and what started out is just like, let's just make a spooky little hack, was suddenly like, oh, all the ideas we've had for years are finding a way to express themselves and be positioned within this game.
Right.
And it's just fitting. It just keeps fitting. It just keeps working.
One page hack will not sustain all of this ideas.
Yeah. So at first it was like a bad thing. We were like, oh my God, this won't fit on one page. but
What if that's the
but
benefit?
what if we just turn this into a big project? And then, that gets followed with all the thoughts of like, oh God, what are we signing up for? Big projects are big. It's months
Hmm.
and years of life. And there's we're familiar now with both the very fun brainstorming side of things and then the 6 to 8 months later, like poring over words in a Word
Right. The
document and
the
like
the
rereading it for the billionth time and
the
being
game
like,
is
what?
90% complete for 6 months, and
Yes.
it's not, you're not working on it that whole time. It's just that like, yeah. Um,
Something I say on the podcast a lot is just like, it's got to be a project you love because that love
mm,
is going to need to sustain you through some hardship. But we
real.
both just fell in love with what this game was becoming. A key moment was when we realized that we wanted to tell a story like Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Mm,
That's when it made a little bit of a hop from a uh, surrealist, vaguely creepy kind of setting to a like, oh, there's like hostile agents, like a hostile force within this amusement park that wants to trap people, that wants their souls, that wants to tempt them into leaving the world behind forever.
mm.
And once that got added to the mix, it's like it just started to crystallize wonderfully. Uh, and that happened, a couple months ago. And we were like, could we kickstart this in time for Halloween? And that was ambitious. It's still ambitious. When we're done in this interview, I'm going to be returning to work on preparing for that to happen. But
Uh,
like, but we're getting there, just under the line, and I love it. I'm really
yeah,
excited.
it is exciting. Uh, for sure. So tell us some. if you will, like give us like a high level pitch for like what's going to be the if people we haven't. I mean, it's a escape an amusement park, escape a creepy
Right.
amusement park. That's the high level pitch, but like what is the what is Escape from Wonderland? Like tell us what that is, and then you can tell us where to the
Okay, this is
crowdfunder
my
and all that
my
kind of stuff.
first live description of the game. All
Yeah.
right, here we go. Escape from Wonderland is about a set of guests attending an amusement park that uh, is no, let me start over. Escape from Wonderland. In Escape from Wonderland, you play as guests in an amusement park that is trying to seduce you into staying forever. It's about people who are going to the park not realizing that they have secret dreams or fears that will be discovered uh, and used against them by the park.
Mm.
It's a one shot game where by the end of the session, each one of our characters is going to find out what brought them to this park, what part of themselves do they need to confront to be able to unlock the exit and escape. And if they aren't able to resist the temptation, they'll be doomed to becoming uh, the an aspect of the park itself and luring other people there instead.
That's good. That's a very that's very compelling
Oh,
little
good.
narrative there. Like I mean, it's great. Like, do you, it's yeah. That sounds great. So if viewers, if that sounds like something you want to know, Evan, tell us where people can find that. Where will the what will the Kickstarter be? I'm sure
Well,
it's Kickstarter, right? Or are you doing a different
right. It's on
crowdfunding?
Kickstarter. So if you go to Kickstarter and type Escape from Wonderland, that should bring it right up. You could also go to turtlebun.com. Turtlebun's the company that Hannah and I run. And, we'll have a link on our website.
Excellent. And I think unless there's any, I mean, while you're giving up the links, you just give them all out. Like I think this is kind of we're wrapping up the show here. We kind
Mm,
of run right to the end. Um, but I do want to give you any opportunity, final thoughts about like anything to say about the process of creation or the crowdfunding campaign or whatever you want to say to close out that idea. We'll definitely put links.
mm.
I will put a link in the description of this video as well, the to the campaign.
Uh, I guess I just want to thank you for having me on and for like connecting with what I'm working on. And I just feel very encouraged and happy that between the podcast and some of the games we've made, like it's been something you've enjoyed and gotten
Mm.
something out of. And I hope that's all that's what I want out of it. That's exactly what I want. That's the whole game here. It's like make people feel like they're having some fun and getting something meaningful. So
Yeah. Well,
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you doing some interesting work and being so open about your process, both on the podcast and here with me this afternoon. As we record. So thank you for your time, and we will try to find some convenient time for Hannah to be on, and
Oh
in the
yeah,
future,
totally.
I'm sure there'll be some other projects that we can be on all together to talk about. So again, thank you for your time today. Tell us one more time, like what's your website? Where's the podcast?
Turtlebun.com. The
Turtlebun.com,
podcast is Design Doc. Just search for Design Doc anywhere you see a podcast online. uh,
where the podcasts are found.
Wherever you find them, Design Doc is there. Uh, we have an Instagram. It's Turtle and Bun. Instagram.com/turtle and bun. It's the only place the and is there.
That's right. We got all gotta
It's a little distinction.
Yeah, every place is slightly different sometimes. Um, all right. Well,
Oh, Patreon. Patreon.com
ooh,
slash turtlebun.
patreon.com.
That's the most uh, I have nothing but immense appreciation for people who are on Patreon. What a extremely personal and special way to support somebody.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do people get like what is on the Patreon that people get? Do they get like
In
updates of
Patreon,
things in progress, early versions of things, photos of
we share
cats?
our workday, our weekly workday logs. So
Okay.
you can follow us in the most granular detail imaginable. Sometimes we do just sort of more like off the cuff recordings
Hmm.
that are that we just released to Patreon, or like when we're talking about media that we like, or like reviewing books or movies. And when we're making new things, Patreon supporters are the first people to get like previews and have a chance to weigh in before the general public sees it.
Hmm. That all sounds great. Um, well, I'll put links to all those things in the description of the video. Thank you once again for your time for recording with me, and I want to thank all the viewers for watching. So we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks again.